I don't think I'm alone anymore. Written by lowercase Hans. I woke up startled, shooting up in my bed in a cold sweat. The house was eerily silent. It felt uncanny, like a bad imitation. My skin crawled. I felt as if there were hundreds of eyes on me, lurking in the dark just beyond the shadows of my vision. I tried to take a deep breath, curled back under the covers, obeying the childhood feeling inside of me that if I couldn't see the bad guys, they couldn't see me. I still couldn't seem to calm down. It confused me. I've woken up paranoid before, but normally I would be able to settle back down in a few minutes. Something this time felt off. I sat up, blankets pulling around my waist, and stared intensely into the darkness, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the dimness.
Hello?
I spoke carefully, internally berating myself for my immaturity. Hello? Even if someone was there, why would they respond to me? A loud creak could be heard from just outside my room. The small living room in my even smaller apartment. I froze. I have no pets, I'm alone, so what could possibly have made that noise? I'd normally write the noise off as the house settling, but the noise was familiar. There's a loose floorboard in my living room that when you step on it, it makes the most awful noise, almost like a dying cat. Someone was in the house with me, I was sure of it. Now, I am a horror movie fanatic. I know better than to explore a dangerous situation instead of just calling the police and letting them handle it. But something about this night felt different. There was a cold vice around my heart, and the thought of having to speak into the phone, no matter how quietly, terrified me. What if they heard? What would they do? These thoughts ran through my head as I sat there gripped with fear. I acknowledged that if I wasn't going to call the authorities, I couldn't just sit in my bed waiting for this person to rob me blind. I slowly swung my legs over the side of the bed, bare feet barely brushing the wooden floor. I reached down and slowly slid my hand under my bed as quietly as I can. I brushed against what I was looking for and quietly pulled it out. It's a weighted, military-grade flashlight. It was my dad's, but he left it behind in the divorce. I took it when I moved out a few years later. I remember clearly being 7 years old and waking my dad up in the middle of the night by poking him. I will never forget the feeling of an ex-marine smashing me across the face with this flashlight. My mom was less than pleased with the stellar broken nose and black eye left behind. I held the flashlight tight in my hand and carefully set both feet on the floor. The boards gave a quiet groan under my weight, but otherwise the room stayed blissfully silent. I padded softly over to the other side of my room, where the door is open a sliver. I wedged my foot into the space, slowly widening it as to make less noise. I realized in this moment that I must make a wild sight. A barely 19-year-old girl, scraping together less than 5 feet 4 inches, standing there in an oversized Hawkeye t-shirt and emoticon pyjama pants, holding a flashlight like a baseball bat. How intimidating. The door opened just enough that I could slide my slight frame through, and I stepped quietly into the room, making sure to avoid the floorboard that made that god-awful creak. I looked around, the room illuminated by nothing but the dim streetlight shining through the half-curtained window. There was no one in the room. The front door is still locked, and both deadbolts are still bolted shut, a precaution from living in the city. Less afraid now that I knew there is no one in the apartment with me, I walked over to the window and checked the lock on that too, pulling the curtain back far enough to see that it is, in fact, still locked and untampered with. I was confused, wondering what on earth could have made the floorboard creak like that when there was no one in the apartment. I sighed, assuming it was my own anxiety getting the best of me, and acknowledged I would likely not be getting any more sleep tonight. I padded softly around the couch and sat down, melting into the worn fabric of my second-hand couch. I reached for the remote on the coffee table, hoping to turn on some mind-numbing infomercial channel or something. And with the light of the TV now illuminating the room, I saw something on the table I hadn't noticed when I sat down. An SD card. Which was odd, because I knew it wasn't mine. The only camera in my house is my computer's webcam, and that doesn't require an SD card. It should have alarmed me more than it did, considering the situation I had just endured, but I was so exhausted from the tight coil of fear that had gripped my lungs for the last 30 minutes that I didn't even question its existence. I waited until the next morning, and after a few cups of coffee, I decided to pop this SD card into my laptop for the hell of it. Just to see what was on the mystery SD card, and if there was any chance it was left from the previous tenant. The card had several scenic photos on it, stuff like the neighborhood, the plants, the type of stuff that amateur photographers take when they're bored and out of ideas. Other than that, there was a video. I, of course, was expecting it to be similar to the pictures, but it wasn't. The video was an extreme close-up of a man playing peekaboo at the camera. Couldn't really make out where he was, since all that was on the screen was his face. That's how zoomed in it was. He didn't exactly look creepy, he was maybe in his mid-40s or something like that. Of course, I'm a woman living alone, and I know things like these should give you the creeps, especially after the situation last night, but I think a part of me wanted to deny the reality sitting right in front of me. After a few seconds, I closed out the video and went about my daily life as usual. A few days later, I had a friend over, and we had decided to take a break from the movie marathon we were watching so I could show him the card with the video on it. I had told him about it earlier that day, and of course I thought it was nothing, but he really wanted to see it, so I figured I'd just show him the video. This is the part where things changed for me. Like I said, I had only watched the first few seconds of the video before writing it off as nonsense. I sat there and watched the rest of the video with my friend, and a part of me really wishes I hadn't. Again, I saw the familiar peekaboo game from last time. It seemed to drag on, almost like it was being looped, and then, after about a minute, the camera began to slowly zoom out, exposing the background. He was in my apartment. And no, I don't mean he used to live in my apartment before me. I mean he was sitting in my apartment, on my couch, with my stuff in the background. When I realized, there was just this unbearable silence that filled the room. My friend and I just stared at each other, speechless. We thoroughly searched my apartment to see if we could find any clues, anything at all, and we found absolutely nothing. I was justifiably horrified at what I had just witnessed, but I knew I couldn't be rash about this. It could have been a one-time thing, and impulsivity would not save me here. I just had renewed my lease a month before, so I knew, shy of getting evicted, I wouldn't be moving anywhere anytime soon. I didn't really know what to do. My friend awkwardly offered up some advice.
Wouldn't it be best to take this video to the police and let them handle it?
I couldn't help but agree with that statement, so I grabbed my laptop with the SD card still jammed in it, and we were on our way. 2 bus rides and a good walk later, we had reached the police station. Before we walked in, I took my backpack off and reached into it to grab my laptop. My hand met nothing but empty air. It was gone. My entire laptop was gone. How could that have happened? I've become quite adept at noticing pickpockets, just part of living in the city, but somehow someone had managed to take my clunky laptop out of my backpack without me noticing. I was justifiably upset. My friend helped me dump out my entire bag onto the sidewalk in front of the police station, as if somehow we could have missed the bulky shape that is my very old laptop. Nothing. It was gone. It was the only thing gone too. My wallet, my phone, even my old lipstick were still safely tucked in my bag. Who could have taken it? Knowing we had lost the only evidence we had, since the locks in my house were all obviously untampered with, and there was no sign of forced entry, we stood there, defeated. Slowly, we gathered ourselves and began the long and disheartening trek home. My friend's house was nearer to the police station, so I was left alone for one last train ride back to my empty apartment. There were only 2 of us on the train, an older man staring intensely at his phone, head tilted in a way where I couldn't make out his face, and me, a visibly upset girl, all alone. As I got off the train, I managed to catch a glimpse of his face. It seemed familiar in a way, and made me shudder. I immediately panicked, thinking it was the man from the video. After a few seconds, I realized I was being irrational. I was just on edge from today's events and just needed some rest. The man on the bus seemed too old to have been the man in the video. He looked too weary and didn't quite have the manic haze the man in the video had. I soon arrived at my apartment building and made the dreadful climb up 3 flights of stairs. In an attempt to avoid the ever-breaking elevator, I was at my front door. Shuffling around miserably, I went digging for my keys, and pulling them out, I noticed something different about them. There was another key on the chain. I don't remember ever having seen this specific key before, and when I held it up to the dim light bulb hanging in the hallway, I realized it was eerily similar to my house key. I pulled my house key up on the chain and lined the 2 keys up to each other. They were the exact same key. I was justifiably confused and a little intimidated by all these creepy events happening in one day. I tried to reason with myself that maybe I had just never noticed the copy there before, but a part of me wasn't fooled. I knew it hadn't been there, and I was starting to realize something bigger was happening here. Sighing, already exhausted from the constant fear the day had wrought, I slid my house key, not a copy, into the lock and twisted. The door opened easily enough, and I quietly stepped into my silent home. Kicking off my cheap sneakers into some crevice I'd had to crawl into tomorrow to grab them, I walked over to my couch and sat down. The cushion moved in a weird way, bending around a shape clearly hidden under it. I startled and moved to stand up. I flipped the couch cushion over, not really sure what to expect, and there, under a second-hand cushion, was my bulky laptop. That was it. The stress was going to kill me. No amount of bullshit reasoning could calm me down. This man was messing with me, playing some sick, twisted game, trying to get in my head. I didn't know what to do. I was sat there just staring. I knew now that he was aware of every move I made. He knew everything I was going to do. I had no ideas left. How could I stop this? I picked up my laptop with shaking hands and slid my hand along the side to where the SD card slot was. There was a card in it still. I took the card out and realized it was different from the first card. This one was a light grey. Written on it in Sharpie, smaller than I thought possible, was one simple phrase: "Play me." I didn't want to do anything this man said, but I was so scared. You have to understand, I didn't know what else to do. I pressed the SD card back into my laptop and the screen flickered to life. I opened the files and saw there were more photos, and again, only one video. I quickly browsed through the photos. They were less scenic this time, more targeted on one specific subject. There were pictures of random objects around my house, some in odd places, like a photo of the underside of my couch and a photo of the inside of my nearly empty pantry. I was already freaked out by these images, knowing that someone had been in my own private space, going through my belongings. But the next photo, nothing could have prepared me for what the next photo was. It was a picture of me, sitting up in bed, staring nervously at the door. It had a timestamp in the corner, unlike most of the images, which was confusing in itself. The timestamp read the date of approximately 2 days ago, the night where I had heard him. He was in my room. He was right in front of me, and I didn't see him. Already terrified, I hesitated to click on the video at the end of the file list. I didn't want to watch it. Didn't want to know what could possibly be on this small card that has already horrified me beyond all belief. I went to close my laptop, but hesitated when I remembered the vaguely threatening message written on the SD card when I first put it in. Sweaty palms dragged the cursor over the file, and with 2 clicks, it opened. The video seemed to be just solid black. Confused, I turned up the brightness on my computer. I realized soon afterwards that the video is, in fact, not black but dimly lit. With the brightness all the way up, I could make out the form of a bed and someone laying curled up on their side in it. It was me. He had a video of me sleeping. Oh my god. The soft mumbling of static mixed with something else had me turning up the sound slowly. Once at full volume, I could make out what the second noise was. He was singing? A slow ballad in a language I didn't understand. Soft hums and warped sounds that sounded vaguely of someone speaking backwards. I wanted nothing more than to shut my laptop off and burn the SD card. But I'd learned from last time. I sat there watching the rest of the video to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I wish I hadn't. In the very last few seconds of the video, he turned the camera around and gave a soft and sickly sweet smile that made the taste of cherry cough syrup rise in my throat. His eyes were horrifying. How had I not noticed this in the first video? They seemed to stick out in the darkness around him, almost glowing, but not quite. The iris and pupil melded together to form one large black sphere pressed solidly against a starkly white sclera. It was only with pure luck that I had a small trash can at the end of my couch, because nothing could have prepared me for the wave of sick that overtook me. I felt utterly hopeless. Leaning over a small teal trash barrel, nauseated and dizzy from the fear. I didn't know what to do. I sat there, having both my bile and my breaths lost. I didn't know what to do anymore. Any false bravado that had kept me going for so long had faded, as the realization that there was nothing I could do to stop him sunk in. That brought up another question though. What did he want from me? I had nothing of value in my home, so I knew it couldn't have been that. Even if it was, he could have just taken it and left. There would be no need for these mind games. I had no clue what he wanted from me. There was nothing more for me to do, so I made a decision, not a smart one albeit, but a decision nonetheless. I would go about my life like normal, stop being terrified every second, and pray to anyone who was listening that he'd stop, that he'd leave me alone. I made that decision about 2 months ago. 2 months have gone by. Every night I'm startled awake by what feels like hundreds of eyes watching me, and I lay there gasping for breath as the overwhelming paranoia crushes me. I couldn't have slept more than 12 hours in the past week. I'm afraid to walk alone to work. I've considered quitting my job. I'm taking the train everywhere, as at least then I don't feel the need to look over my shoulder constantly. I'd taken to ignoring the SD cards that randomly appeared. But about 2 weeks ago, I woke up to a printed photograph on my kitchen table. I've refused to set foot in the kitchen since. My home, that was once my safe haven, now feels like a war zone with every move I make. Stress is killing me, I'm sure of it. I think he knows it too. Was that his goal? To drive me insane? I refuse to let him. I refuse to live another day like this. I'm taking this into my own hands, and I'm going to find him.